something. Can you hear me now? I can hear you.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Woo. I'm an audio video technician. You'd think you'd be able to fix this.
Okay,
I
well,
apologize.
let's,
Okay. Yeah. I think it feels like the heat is on full blast. I don't know.
yeah, there's a lot of heat coming in right
Yeah.
here.
Are you guys good if I turn that off for now? Or at least down a little bit?
Yeah, down a little bit would be good.
All right.
Just don't sing it for us.
Will not.
Really, really cold at the front of the room in Singapore. Really cold. Like you couldn't sit at the front table.
Okay, well, we're at 4:30, so we should probably start.
Yep. Want to go ahead?
Sure. What happened to? Okay, that's what I needed. All right, great. So welcome to the UUIDREV meeting. I'm Jim Fenton, and Michael Richardson, the co-chair, is also here. And he is currently displaying the Note Well slide, which, of course, is a reminder to everyone that everything that you, all discussions in the meeting are under the terms of the Note Well, which basically has a lot to do with the intellectual property rights that you are ceding to IETF as a result of the discussion. And so you should read this in detail if you haven't already. Hopefully you have already. Isn't there also a companion slide? Do you have the other slide?
That's just the website.
Okay.
That website goes down at the bottom and says,
Okay.
put up this one.
Okay. This is fine. I was referring to sort of the conduct rules and so forth, but hopefully with this
Sorry, I didn't put that one up.
small group, that is not an issue. Okay, great. So thank you to everyone who is here. We have, as a very small working group, we have a limited set of slides and so forth on the part of the chairs. Do we have volunteers for a note taker? Anybody in the group that is that's willing to do that?
I mean, I can do that once I get started up here. It'll be a moment.
Yeah, that would be great. Thank you, Brendan.
Yeah, thanks, Brendan. So Brendan has volunteered to take notes, and that will be beginning very soon. It looks like he's almost ready. And he's powered by cookies there. That looks good. Good
What
plan.
else?
And I think the main speaker, the main presenter for today will be Kaiser Davis, and we'll get his slides up here in just a moment. If you stand by. You have those?
And I'm going to give you slide control if I can, Kaiser.
Sure.
Slide control there. So you should have the buttons on the bottom.
Yep.
Yep.
Got it. Got it. Thank you for that. Thanks for sharing.
A little bit.
All right, folks, I appreciate everybody having me today. Kaiser Davis, Cisco Systems. Today we're going to talk about a couple different items, and we're going to spend the bulk of this, since we had an interim meeting pretty recently, we're going to spend the bulk of this talking about what we're going to do next, but we'll get through this very quickly in the first set of slides. Summary today is just discussing why we're here, what we're doing. We're going to discuss fixing errata, the new table of contents in the document, some things I did to version 3, 4, and 5, and then other housekeeping, and what are we going to do for draft 1, what's slated for release at the end of the month. So the story thus far is myself and Brad Peabody, we're working on draft for new UUID formats. This added specifically version 6, 7, 8, and UUID Max, and some best practices that weren't in 4122. We went to IETF 114. We did a dispatch session, and they officially said, hey, we should create this working group, which is where we're at right now. So the goal of draft 0 was to merge what we had in the new Peabody document with RFC 4122, right? In addition to this, we're going to go ahead and fix the errata. We're going to squash those as we go, right, as bugs. So the new draft 0.0 that's been published in October was effectively the merge of these two documents. So if you're not up to speed on 6, 7, 8, you know, take a little bit of time to look at that. If you're not up to speed with some of the errata, take some time to look at that, because that's what we're going to be talking about going forward. One thing that we found in creating the Peabody document was that the 4122 layout and table of contents is just tough, very tough to work with to get the concepts that we need across. So in about draft 3 of our document, we decided to overhaul the table of contents, make it a little bit more readable, provide some better groupings for these need to know information, things that are related, and things that are best practices. So you don't have to jump around 15 different places in the document. So in the order we got when we came away with was introductions and IETF language, UUID formats, UUID layouts, the best practices, the IETF considerations and things we need like security considerations, IANA considerations, the references, and then appendixes for things like code and test vectors and all the other stuff we want to shove at the bottom as references. Feedback from around the internet and on the working group and some unicast chats and stuff seemed to be that this was a good table of contents. It was very readable. It was better than 4122. So I think we should be good to keep it. But please let me know what you think of that. One thing to note here is if you're looking at 4122 and you're looking at our document, you're going to see a distinct missing sections, which are those algorithms to create maybe a time-based UUID or a random-based UUID. Again, I removed these around draft 3 of our document because they just didn't work well, and it caused all kinds of weird issues extrapolating that. So that stuff has been just reworked into the specific layout section, right? So how to create a UUID version 3 is all contained within UUID version 3, and then any best practices for maybe 3 and 5 are down in a specific name-based UUID section. So kind of just a slightly different layout, but that content still exists.
Quick question, speaking a little bit out of turn, is the are those algorithms, are they going in as informative appendices or anything like that, or are they going to be out entirely?
I've reused all of the text from those. They're just very dated in the way that they're written. I guess is the best way to put it. I can easily just copy and paste and put them in as appendixes if we don't want to lose the text, but I don't think anything that was there is gone. And it was just very tough writing like version 7 to one of those for a version 7 and stuff. We just had a lot of issues with it. It seemed to just take a lot of text that wasn't needed. It could be better conveyed in a different format. Okay, but I'm fine with adding them if we want. I mean, that's fine with me. I'll throw it on the mailer.
I wasn't concerned about the specific text. I just wanted to make sure that the you know, the nature of the algorithms, that we weren't losing the algorithms entirely.
So the algorithms aren't necessarily an algorithm like you would expect, like a code algorithm or math or any of those types. They're just text. Like here's a set of steps, and they're not even steps. They're just unnumbered bulleted list of do these things from a very basic programmatic view. Kind of just it's pseudocode more than anything.
We haven't lost the old document either.
Okay, yeah, that's true. Thank you.
Awesome. Next up is the errata. So I actually wasn't planning to get this done in draft 0.0, but when I was creating the errata entries for the GitHub and actually just reading these, I started kind of just seeing the big picture that these sort of fell into 2 categories, and that's grammatical errata, which were super easy to fix. I mean, we just follow what they say to do in there, and I agreed with pretty much all of them, as well as lots of errata just around clarifications around which bit where, which level of Indianness should we use. they're harder to fix, and I have gone through the document and made an attempt to make it conform to each of these 6 Indian sort of bit layout erratas. And really, to boil it down, it comes down to very consistent language, using Big Indian, because that's what every one of these uses from what I can see in reviewing the other specs. Defining where our most significant bits are, using some helper verbiage like leftmost if we're talking about that. Defining where our bit and byte order and numbering start. So I put some text in, actually borrowed from X667, which this document's kind of mirrored with, we'll talk about in a minute, that talks about how we start our numbering, where our bits and bytes are, where things like the variant should be, where these bytes exist, kind of just being very specific, overly specific in these, and to hit on these points so people know exactly how and where we're talking about in these 128 bits. And I think I did a pretty good job. I do want to solicit some feedback on these topics right here, since they were such a major deal. Just look at these, keep them in the back of your head, and then when you look through the document, see if something I wrote is incorrectly referencing or might have some gray area, and then we can fix it, right? Because this is, out of all the errata, this is the biggest thing that we want to fix. But I think at the moment, the errata is good unless somebody tells me otherwise, is my final point. Moving to the document. So in the document, the original document 4122, version 1 was kind of the starting point for all of the other UUIDs. It used the bit layout and sort of the block layout of all the bits. It used the names of all the different fields, and everything referenced back to that. So if you were doing a version 4 UUID, or you were following the version 4 algorithm to create a random UUID, everything used terms like it was a UUID version 1. Because that was the starting point of reference. And it can become very confusing, especially in version 3 and version 5, when you're talking about modifying a field called time in milliseconds or time high and low, and you're changing it to be some other meaning. So one thing we did with version 6, 7, and 8 is we gave them all their own block layouts. They got their own field definitions. And in that section, you can go straight to that section and see it without needing to go read and understand UUID version 1. So I did that with 3, 4, and 5. There's a lot of net new text and a lot of text pulled from those algorithms to create X, right? So it decouples these, provides better clarification, and allows me to, again, group together things that are super important to these, as well as provide better text vectors and extra clarification that we didn't have, because it was here's version 1 and it's the bulk of the document, and then here's how you do these other 3, and they reference version 1. So you got the chicken for the egg scenario. Maybe you don't care about version 1. You just want to do a version 3. Well, now the section just has that, and it has everything you need to know about that. So update here, I want to just get some reviews on version 3, 4, and 5 text. They should mean exactly the same as they meant in the previous document. If I maybe move something or gloss something slightly incorrectly, I apologize. I can fix it. But this is all net new for 3, 4, and 5. A lot of net new. Next up is general housekeeping. I went through the document, replaced any HTTP link with HTTPS links to the relevant site. All RFC references have been updated to their latest versions, as well as external references. If something's been bumped, I made sure I checked it and bumped it. As well as security considerations, I added some info for SHA-1 and MD5, since we have a couple RFCs discussing those topics specifically. I added those to the relevant security consideration links and referenced them appropriately.
Go ahead, Mary.
There's one RFC reference you haven't updated, which is 4234. 5234 is current for ABNF.
It is current for ABNF. Okay, ABNF. Did I bump ABNF, or did I just not update the reference?
You're still referring to 4234. And I have some other corrections to make around ABNF, but since you listed RFC references, I thought I'd mention it.
Yeah. Okay. Understood. Yeah. Yeah. And that is one thing I didn't think about here. The ABNF, the way the ABNF was, maybe I looked at that and didn't update it, but I did touch the ABNF stuff just a slight bit. I forgot to put this in the notes. So maybe we can talk about that real fast if you would like, since we're on the topic ABNF, before I go into the draft one.
Your change log says you went from 2234 to 4234, but the correct current reference is 5234.
Okay, so I just did okay, understood. Yep, I see my mistake.
That's right. What was the other thing you wanted to talk about?
So with ABNF, I did shorten the ABNF nomenclature just slightly because it was much larger than it needed to be for the logic of ABNF, but it still conveys the same meaning. I just made it more concise. That's
okay. One of the things I was just looking at some of the ABNF, and for example, you have a token called hex octet, I think, and I couldn't figure out where that's defined.
Yeah, I believe that was also from theirs, but I'll take a look at it.
If the thing is, if you're obsoleting 4122, you have to carry the definitions forward because that document's dead then. Yeah,
I guess the hex octet should be 2 hex digits put together, which should be there. And if I accidentally cut it off, I'll add it back. But yeah,
what you have is 2 hex octet, like that's the literal string. I think it should be 2 star, but also hex octet itself is not defined anywhere.
Yeah, I might have dropped the hex octet on accident.
I didn't want to. You don't have to get into all those. I can email you all that stuff as I find it.
Yeah, I understand you. I understand your point. Yep. The 2 hex octet and the 4 hex octet, those are from the original document specifically. The reason that I redid the ABNF was because it all referenced back to UUID version 1. So again, decoupling version 1 from other stuff. So ABNF was rewritten, but I may have just missed hex octet. Thank you for that. All right. Next up is some action items. So we're going to talk about things that I plan to do for draft 1. Cadence for releasing would be monthly. So I plan to work on these and push this out by the end of the month. We'll iterate on that, draft 2 by the end of December, so on and so forth till IETF 115, or 116. So we got some time till March. This one is IETF names or namespaces specifically for version 3. When I did an audit and review of a bunch of the big libraries that implement version 3 and 5, I found that the majority of these libraries only define the namespaces that we defined in 4122. Furthermore, there's no text describing how we got to these values in the first place. So I don't know where they came from. They're just slapped into an appendix. I see some logic in them, but if anybody has any threads or mailers, they can send me something from the old days. That'd be awesome. But my point here is, should we potentially toss in a new namespace that follows what I see as the logic for something like IoT devices and databases, which are nowadays very big use cases, so that other libraries will implement them? Because it seems to be, again, that if we don't define it, they won't implement it. And there could be others. These are just the 2 off the top of my head with working with UUIDs in this space for the past 3 years. So I can work on that. I don't know if there's any comments, any open items, anybody want to discuss. We can move to the next slide if so.
Yeah, Brendan has a comment, so we'll recognize him.
I've encountered a number of missing namespaces as I've been working in Suite as well. And the solution at the time was to put down the mechanism to generate the namespaces I used in the Suite manifest draft. I'd be happy to forward that on to you. One of the things that I thought was particularly relevant is that there was no private enterprise number prefix. There was an OID prefix, but there was no definition about how you dealt with OIDs and what kind of encoding you used for the OID when generating a UUID. So I wrote all of that down and how I was going to do it. I thought maybe that would be something to document as well, and I'd be happy to send that on to you.
Yes, please. I'll look forward to that. I got a topic on OIDs that's coming up in another slide. Thank you. We'll touch on that. But yeah, I think you're right. We just need to define a couple more namespaces and then just a better way to how we handle this.
Okay, thank you.
3 and 5. Yep. And just commenting on Murray out loud, I do see the issue with the hex octet. I just, I'll put it on the mailer. Thank you. I'm going to move to this one quick slide. I don't know if the gentleman who brought this up in the interim meeting is on this meeting, but there was a discussion around adding some best practices with running out of random. That is, do you generate random for every UUID and you slap it in there, or do you generate one set of random and some counters? And is there some security considerations around using certain types of pseudo-random generators versus other types, which can cause issues with running out of random, exhausting your random entropy source? And honestly, yeah, it's a little bit out of my league on that topic to write about it. The gentleman said he was going to send me some notes. I never saw the notes. I checked all the issue trackers. I don't know what the context was there. So if anybody has that person or that name, I'd love to sync up with them as well.
So Brendan Moran here again, that person was me. The
Okay.
issue specifically is that on certain hardware that uses true random number generators, you can exhaust the TRNG. That can be used to construct side channels inside your processor. This is probably not something you want.
Okay. Is that a, in terms of how we change this and modify the text, I can propose some text and have you review it. Does that seem okay, Brendan?
Yeah, absolutely. I think fundamentally it's just a question of maybe don't generate a new random number for every single UUID. Maybe for every single time increment would be enough.
Yeah, or as Brad and I have said, we lay out the pros and the cons and make sure we explicitly define the cons. And if somebody wants to go against that and they willingly know what they're doing, so be it. But yeah, I think we just define it.
Sounds like a security considerations section.
Absolutely. Yep, that's where I have it tagged for right now. Thank you. Okay, that one's good. Got that. Thank you. Namespace registration template. I need to update the namespace registration template and make sure that it follows our new RFC 8141. That shouldn't take too long to do. It's just, do we actually need to put a namespace registration template in since it's already allocated? I guess that's a question for the chairs. How to handle this? Do I just slap the new updated template in? Do we need to submit anything after updating it?
I think if it's already been allocated in 4122, then we actually don't, there's no IANA consideration for that. We just go ahead. We may say IANA allocated this and that's it. If we need to reference it, we can say it was already allocated by this other RFC.
Okay, understood.
And if you look at what happens to the document, like 4122's probably said, "Dear IANA, please do this registration for us." And then as I got processed, it said IANA, it's a past tense. It says IANA allocated blah, blah, blah. So the text in 4122, actually, you could just use that text if you wanted. If we needed to be clear that we had allocated this, then you can just use that text, IANA allocated blah, 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 as per RFC 4122, and you're done. There's no action in the end. Okay,
I'll check it and double check. I've put it in a appendix because at the original document had it in smack dab as like one of the first things you read, which is kind of out of place and broke and really messed with the logical reading of the document. So I've moved that to an appendix.
Yeah, it probably should go so that would wind up after the author's names, and so probably it should go, and the references, it probably should go before those, so it shouldn't be an appendix.
Okay, I can move it out.
But I agree with you.
Should I move it to the IANA consideration section, which
Yes.
at the moment says no considerations?
Yes, I would do that.
Okay, that works. Got it. Next up is I've got a couple issue tracker items for version 7 and 8. Number one is at some point we had version 8 restricted to just new versions of time-based UUIDs, and then it was relaxed to any, vendor-specific implementation UUIDs can't do or experimental. And I forgot to remove some verbiage, so Brufa caught some info there, and we're going to remove that. And then this one is further clarifying field descriptions. It doesn't change anything specifically, but just adds a little bit further clarification about the usage of milliseconds timestamp and a couple forward references. So I think they should be good to merge. I just wanted to ask the group and make sure if we're okay with that. They're really just very simple, small, non-impacting changes.
Have you asked the question on the list? That's probably the best way to make sure that it's covered and documented.
Yep, I haven't moved it yet. I can.
Great, thank you.
Okay. This one's a little bit longer, and I will take this to the list. This is from Ben. Ben put out discussing the fact that we have the max UUID. The max UUID does encroach upon the reserved variant space, which is at the moment a hex value of an E or an F. And the variant ID would have all hex values of F because it's all ones. And we need to effectively discuss where that lies and how to effectively put that in there. This doesn't affect the nil UUID because that kind of goes into some older terminology called families, which is what was used before there were variants. And effectively, Ben is looking to update the variant table with a section that adds a column for bytes so that within the hex of F for the future variant, we can discuss what that byte can or cannot be. It's very, very clarified, like to a very nitty gritty kind of level that I'm not sure if we really need to do. It makes sense when you discuss it. There's a lot of discussion here. I can take it to the mailer. This is one thing that I'm going to look at for draft one. And it's just, do we add another column to the table, taking this to a byte level for these variants and what is or is not available? Next up is, this one is something I came across while I was just looking through all the references and updating the references and really just trying to make sure 4122 stood on its own, or the new document stood on its own. And I noticed that apparently at one point in time, RFC 4122, ITU X667, and the ISO 983-8 documents were exactly the same. They were all the same document. One was telecommunication standard, an international standard, and then an RFC proposed standard. In 667, they updated it in 2008, and then they updated again in 2012. I assume ISO is in lockstep because they updated their document in 2008, and then again in 2014, but 2014 and 2012 documents look to be exactly the same. Our document was never updated and has none of these changes. Specifically, one of these things in there is discussing OIDs and how to use a UUID as an OID. So to the other gentleman's comments about OIDs, they have that text in their document, which we could take. Now, we've got a different table of contents. We've potentially added 6, 7, 8 max, and we've added a significant deviation. My concern is, first, where do we fit into this picture, and do we have the authority to add the new UUIDs and the things that we are doing? And if we do, how do we get involvement with ITU and ISO so that they can be in lockstep with us? And final question, should I pull in text like the OID information and whatever else I can diff out from their changelog into our document? And that's the open floor for questions and shares.
Microphone, yeah.
Go ahead. I think we have liaisons to those organizations. So either the chairs or I can help you activate them to ask those questions of those organizations. I'm curious, another way to turn that question around is, what do these organizations think of 4122 in terms of its authority?
Exactly. And they were updating without us. So maybe they
How did
claim
they do
authority.
How did they do that without violating our copyright? No, I'm serious. I'm serious.
I understand. Seriously, I didn't even thought of that.
Because, well, no, but if you go, I went and looked up the documents, the ISO document, they want 198 Swiss francs for.
That was gonna be my next question.
Yeah.
Are these
So-
behind paywalls?
So that's the weird part. So the ISO IEC document is behind a paywall. The ITU document is one of the rare ones that's not,
Right.
but they
Exactly.
probably they've converted it to Word and stuck their copyright on it.
Yeah, there's it's sticky. Is the best way to put it.
They have the authority to update it because they yeah. So I mean, I'm not sure that we can copy and paste their text, but you know, we certainly can make sure we're not incompatible.
Right.
Right.
Let's get the liaisons involved.
Yeah, exactly. Okay.
So my next question was going to be, are either of these behind paywalls? Because when it come to the ISG for review and we can't review your referenced documents, how are we supposed to say that this is good or not? So that's something to start thinking about earlier. Usually the solution is we go to the organization and say, look, we need this. We need temporary access to this so that reviewers can do their thing. You don't have to give us permanent free anything. But we the ISG have sometimes gotten sticky about that when those come up.
Absolutely. Thank you. Yes, ISO is behind a paywall. Yeah, and that's it. I'll look for those liaisons from the chairs and see what we can discuss. The only thing that I would say we would probably have to define, and it's a quick one-liner, is the OIDs, and I can easily add that to draft 1, and it references back to X667, so we can put our own spin on the language and the verbiage and write it up. But they do have a really nice defined way to use OIDs as an integer or as a hex layout, hex and dash.
Yes, Brendan, go ahead.
So the OID consideration that I was mentioning earlier was the reverse. It was, how do you convert an OID into a UUID? And there is a namespace defined for that in 4122, but it does not explain which encoding of OID you should use. And I have seen people using text encodings of OIDs. I have seen people using binary encodings of OIDs. And I guarantee you, because I did it, you're going to find someone using a CBOR encoding of an OID.
Yep, understood. Yeah, I see what you mean with the namespace, the OID namespace, and vice versa. Okay, I got it on my notes here. Last one was just thinking about long-term with this. Let's say we have all this, we're ready to go. We got all of our drafts finished. This sat as a proposed standard for a pretty long time. The ITU has theirs as a telecommunications standard. We got the ISO international standard. Should this be potentially something that is an internet standard, so it has the same authority as the rest? And in that respect, how do you propose, once we get to that point, how does it get elevated? Because it sat since 2005 as a proposed standard, and I see this everywhere. It's ubiquitous across anything you look at in tech.
Go ahead, Murray.
On first glance, and there may be some subtleties here that I haven't grasped yet, you're adding 3 new UUID types that have never been standardized before, so you can't go to internet standard right now. You could on everything up to 6, but not 6, 7, and 8 themselves because they're new, or they appear to be new from our perspective. So the process then would be you rev this like you're doing at proposed standard, and then for whatever period of time we're supposed to wait, you wait, let it deploy and be out in the world, and then you come back around and say, all right, we need to elevate this to internet standard without changing, or like with whatever changes are allowed for that piece of the process. But I think you get resistance right now to be, wait a minute, you can't introduce 3 types and say it's a standard.
Yep, that completely makes sense. Yep,
I
I'm
was
tracking.
I was going to say exactly the same thing, and I think that number is 2 years, and I think it can be done as we don't have to revenue document necessarily. If there's a RADA, then we would, but otherwise it's a ISG magic wand.
Yep.
And it becomes
and I think
moves up a step.
I think it's errata, or anything like if you have 1 through 8 and like you discovered nobody uses 2, so let's just take 2 out, or mark 2 as deprecated, 1 through 8 except for 2. I'm making this up as I go, but then we can say this is all standard except 2 is deprecated, and then that would work too.
And I think we are removing some in this document, right?
There's nothing removed Two is just not owned by us. It's got its own specification through a whole completely different organizational body. And
Okay.
I just added a second reference to that so that people can go do that if they want. It's almost never implemented anywhere. And on the comment of who has authority, every library that I've looked at in source code reviews has used 4122 in snippets and references to 4122 as for their implementation.
That's because one of them costs money and the other one probably cost money until recently. And why would you bother, right?
Right. I completely understand. Yep. I just wanted to comment on that. That was all I had. And I guess I'll turn it back over to you folks. Thank you.
So one more, you don't have an issue about this yet, and I haven't raised it before, so surprise. I looked at 4122 and it has no use of BCP 14 or like must should, none of that stuff is there. You've added it in this document, but generally?
Yeah.
Okay.
The template that gets created by one of the other folks on here, Michael or so, that adds that. And yes, our draft originally had that as well. So yes,
Okay.
we had BCP 14 in there.
Okay, so there's 44 shoulds in this document. And every time I see one of those, I think, all right, so you're giving an implementer a choice to do one or the other, like do the thing or not do the thing, but there's no particular guidance about why you might not do the thing that it says you should do. And we generally these days like to see some sort of hint about why might I decide not to do what this is? Why might I legitimately sorry, let me start again. Why might I legitimately decide not to do what the should says? And if you can't come up with an answer to that, then maybe it's either a may or a must.
Yes.
And I think that comes from just reluctance on the part of polite people to tell people must.
Yes.
Right. And so you exactly. So
And
I think they're almost all musts, but we have to go through and see if there's exceptions.
That's what I was going to suggest, to just go through and make how do you really feel comfortable giving someone if they're giving them absolute breadth to decide, then it's a may. If you're giving them no way out, then it's a must. Otherwise, you should have a clear idea in your head why I might decide not to do whatever the thing says.
Yeah, and my comment on that specifically is the entire best practices section does detail the yeses and the nos, the why would you do this and why wouldn't you do this, and then provides the should guidance. We had a fair amount of musts in like draft 03, I think, and every issue tracker, it seemed like everybody was opening was this must should be a should because they have some situation where they want to do something slightly different. So we documented that in the best practice and took it from a must down to a should. So we actually did have way more musts back in the day that got moved down to shoulds because people wanted us to document one-offs and caveats and things that we put in best practices. So that's my comment on the must versus should.
So we need to just, someone else needs to do a walkthrough, not you, Kaiser, because you're probably too close to the text.
I'm too close. Yes.
Yes. And just figure out whether there's an exception listed clearly.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I completely understand and I do want that. So if there isn't, I'm all for it.
They're not all in best practices. For example, for version 8, UUIDV8's uniqueness will be implementation specific and should not be assumed. When am I okay to assume it?
Yeah.
If you're going to say should not, okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Yep. That's an easy must not. Yep. Got it.
So that was your last slide, was it?
Yes. Yes, sir.
So I have one item to bring up, which is future virtual interims. And I want to leave that too late to rush to the end. But first, I think we should just open the mic line to any other issues or agenda bashes at this point. Anybody else? So I'm going to kick you off the slides here. How do I do that? Revoke slides. And share that screen. So So we had put up on the mailing list back in October a second not a doodle poll. They really annoyed me. It was a paying customer. I paid for like 8 years, and anyway. So try this thing, Rally. This was the link here. I've just posted that link into the chat as well a couple minutes ago. And we have basically 5 of us having answered this. So it would be great if you care about when we schedule things, if you want to put your name there. And so, you know, like I can see that November 23rd, which is maybe a bit soon, would be a really good time. But there's other days that would work or not work. And so we're just going to pick some of those days as I think we wanted to have a virtual interim in early December and middle January and middle February, with the idea that we cancel them if we're all done, and that we would probably ideally not have an in-person meeting in March because we'd be in working group last call or past that point. Does anyone have a problem with that schedule? So please get your name in there if you want to attend. Based on, I think most of us being mostly in North America, Brendan's exception, that would probably wind up, you know, with late morning kind of times for that traditional 10 o'clock Eastern, you know, or something like that.
My team's in Austin. I have late calls all the time.
Yeah, exactly. So I expect it to be in your time zone, but I won't be. So put your name there. And that's about it for me. We covered the other question I had, which was the standards internet draft and how internet standard and how we're going to get there. So we covered that already.
I was going to talk a little bit about working group adoption and that sort of thing. So from a process standpoint, I think we kind of jumped a step on the process in moving it from the initial author drafts to a working group draft, because you know that's normally accompanied by kind of a working group consensus and that sort of thing. So in any case, that has happened, and you know we don't need to revisit that, I don't think. But one thing I'd like you to like to have everybody keep in mind is that, I mean, to the extent that everybody's kind of agreed on everything, then sure, just edit it into the document, no problem. But as a working group draft, the original authors are now editors, and so really the idea is that if there's something that's controversial that we need to come to agreement on, then that needs to be a consensus call from the working group, and you know what goes in is the working group consensus. So you know, as long as things are moving slowly, as long as things are moving smoothly, let's keep going on this. But if we get to a point where there's something that there's some disagreement on, let's not jump to doing it. Let's take the time to get a working group decision on those things. Okay.
And one of the good technical ways of doing that is to make it a pull request that you can then share on the list, so then people can see exactly what the text is that you're proposing or arguing about. And we can actually even walk through those. In fact, that's what I would propose we do in our next virtual interim, is that we literally just share the GitHub page that's on the screen now. And, you know, if there's wordsmithing or arguments about that, then we'll do that, right? We don't need slideware, is what I'm saying. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think the amount of changes that are left are easy enough to do in small pull requests like that. So completely understand. The amount of text that we were doing for draft 0 was very hard to summarize in pull request. But yes, I can do that.
And yeah, that's fine. So we're beyond that now, and let's just kind of try and use that philosophy going forward.
Are we done?
I think we're done. Is there any other business for the working group? Going once, going twice. Thank you all. we're done.
Nice work.
All right.
I did that last line, right?
Did you? I don't know.
Yeah, for the document that was always listed as being.
Oh, I think you get too many L, are there 3 L's in Raleigh?
Yeah, no, that's correct.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, sorry, what was someone said,
That last line, did I get that right?
they're not all in best practices?
No.
Oh.
Below that, AOB, like.
Propose that virtual engineering process GitHub users to iterate quickly. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's what I'm trying to say.
Just making sure I got it right.
Yeah, I think that's right.
The document that was listed in the charter as being, this is the base document, was this listed as like,
Yeah.
this is our starting point? Then you already have IETF consensus that that's your starting point, so I think you can get away with no call for adoption on it, just don't worry about it.
Yeah, anyway, it's adoption is at our whim.
Yeah.
The fact that we ask people is a weird thing that has no basis in,
If there's any controversy, that's the safe way to go.
Yeah. but has no basis in any document. It's actually at our whim. We're entrusted to act by fiat when it comes to what we're working on.
Thanks, Kaiser. Nice work.
Thanks, Kaiser, as well.
Anytime, group. It was a pleasure.
Thanks a lot. Right, I'm gonna post the text that I have from Sue to the list. That's helpful, right?
Yeah, totally.
Yes.
And there's a button up. There's a button actually. I just closed my window. Actually, we'll import this as our minutes already. It's in the data tracker.
Oh, yeah, I saw that one.
Yeah, it's a fun button.
So are you going to push the button?
You can go ahead if you still have your laptop open. I just closed mine before I actually
Okay.
thought of it.
I guess that's.
Yeah. I'm really ran into yeah, I mean, it looks like it's good. Put it at the top of your queue. Thanks, see ya.
So you're going back to North America?
I'm going back to North America. Yeah, I was supposed to go back to Berlin on Saturday, but my place to stay disappeared because my visa to remain couldn't remain as long as I thought it could. That's all I'll say on this. I open my. That's being recorded. Okay, I'm off.
Good, okay, so at least I know what time zone you're on now.
Yeah, but I won't. I'm
Yeah.